Okay, so you want to own a food truck. No rent, no landlord, no 10-year lease. Just you, a truck with your name painted on the side, and the freedom to park wherever the customers are. Slow Tuesday at one corner, drive to a better one tomorrow. That's the picture in your head, the food business, but with all the shackles cut off. Here's the problem, the freedom is real. The no rent part is almost a myth. And the gap between those two things is where most food truck owners get into trouble. Let's start with the illusion, because it's a specific one. People assume a food truck is a cheap restaurant on wheels. It isn't. It's a mobile restaurant, with everything a restaurant needs, just crammed into 200 square feet, and required to pass inspection every time it moves. The biggest misconception in this industry is thinking low startup cost means low complexity. It doesn't. You're still purchasing a kitchen, outfitting it with commercial equipment, carrying multiple kinds of insurance, and satisfying a health department. You've just also bought yourself an engine, a transmission, and a set of tires that can break down on the way to your own shift. So, what are you actually buying into? There are really three paths in. You can buy a used truck, the cheapest and most common entry point. You can commission a new custom build, which costs more, but arrives ready to pass inspection with a warranty behind it. Or you can start with a trailer, the lowest cost option of all, with the trade-off that you now need a separate vehicle to tow it. And many cities restrict trailers from the same street parking permits trucks get. There's also a fourth option almost nobody mentions, renting a ready-to-operate truck by the month, which lets you test whether you can actually sell the food before committing 6 figures to a vehicle. Now, what does it actually cost to get on the road? The full range runs from $50,000 to $200,000, with the average first-time setup landing somewhere between $85,000 and $120,000. The truck itself is 50 to 70% of that number. A used truck runs $40,000 to $100,000, depending on condition and mileage. A new custom build starts around $80,000 and can push past $200,000 once you're outfitting it for a labor-intensive menu. 3 flat tops, a fryer bank, a convection oven, a charbroiler. On top of the truck, budget another $10,000 to $28,000 for equipment upgrades, permits, initial inventory, and working capital. And that permit number is not a fixed cost. It depends entirely on where you're parking. Denver charges around $811. Boston can run past $17,000. Same truck, same menu, completely different bill, depending purely on which city drew the line. Here's a cost almost nobody budgets correctly on their first pass: the commissary. Most cities require food trucks to prep, clean, and store out of a licensed commercial kitchen when they're not on the road. You can't just cook out of your home garage. That runs $500 to $1,500 a month, every month, whether you sold a single taco that week or not. Add insurance, commercial auto, general liability, product liability, running $2,500 to $6,000 a year combined. Add the US Chamber of Commerce's estimate that the average operator spends close to $28,000 in total permits, licenses, and legal compliance just to get through year one. None of that touches the truck. None of that touches the food. That's just the cost of being allowed to operate. Now, here's a number worth pausing on, because it gets repeated constantly and it's mostly a myth. You'll hear that 50 to 60% of food trucks fail, often within the first year. Track that claim back to its source and it almost always dissolves into restaurant industry statistics, mislabeled. The real comparison is more interesting than the scary number. Roughly 60% of restaurants close within their first 3 years. Food trucks, by contrast, appear to survive at close to the opposite rate, something closer to 60% still operating past the 3-year mark. Same industry, opposite framing. And the reason makes sense once you think about it structurally. Lower fixed costs, and the ability to physically drive to a better location tomorrow, instead of being locked into a bad lease for 5 years. The real risk in this business isn't the truck breaking down on the highway of failure statistics. It's something quieter. So you've got your truck, your permits, your commissary contract. Here's where the whole picture flips, because the money isn't where the menu makes you think it is. A well-run food truck can carry a gross margin of 60 to 75% on individual menu items. That's the number that gets quoted in every "How much do food trucks make?" article. And it's real. But gross margin only covers your ingredients. Once you subtract labor, which typically eats 20 to 30% of revenue, and food cost, which eats another 25 to 35%, and then stack fuel, commissary rent, insurance and permits on top of that. The overall net margin for a truck running with employees collapses down to somewhere around 6 to 9%. Owner-operators, the ones working the window themselves instead of paying a crew, do meaningfully better, often landing between 7% and 15%, sometimes higher, purely because they've eliminated one of the two biggest cost lines in the business. So where does the real profit actually come from, if it's not the daily lunch rush? Two places, and neither one is on your regular menu board. The first is catering. Corporate lunches, weddings, office parties, private events. Catering margins run 40 to 60%, compared to 10 to 20% on a normal street service day. Because you're not fighting for walk-up traffic, you're selling a guaranteed headcount at a price you set in advance. Some of the most successful operators in the country now generate the majority of their revenue from private events and catering, not street vending at all. One frequently cited operator does 60% of total sales through catering alone. Corporate lunch programs are especially powerful here. A single account, feeding 50 employees twice a week, can generate $60,000 to $100,000 a year in predictable, high-margin revenue. That's the kind of number that smooths out every slow Tuesday you were worried about. The second is throughput, the same lever that matters in a coffee shop or a dealership's service bay, just wearing a different apron. Speed of service, measured in orders per hour, determines your daily ceiling more than your menu price does. A truck that can push out 150 orders in a lunch rush earns more than an identical truck selling the same food at the same price, but only managing 80. Because the fixed costs, the commissary, the insurance, the permits, don't care how fast you're working. They get paid the same either way. This is exactly why the smartest operators trim their menus down instead of expanding them. Fewer items means faster execution, which means more orders fit inside the same 3-hour lunch window. Now, the seasonal trap, because it catches almost everyone eventually. Revenue in most US markets can swing 30 to 50% lower in winter compared to peak summer months. The fixed costs, commissary rent, insurance, permit renewals, don't take the winter off. Experienced operators treat catering specifically as their winter insurance policy, because indoor corporate events and holiday parties keep booking even when the sidewalks are empty. Let's talk about how this breaks at an industry level, using something that happened at the start of this year. Cruising Kitchens, a San Antonio-based manufacturer of custom food trucks and mobile kitchens, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in January of 2026. This wasn't a single food truck owner. This was the company building the trucks for other people's dreams. During the pandemic-era boom in ghost kitchens and mobile food concepts, Cruising Kitchens expanded aggressively, building out substantial manufacturing capacity to keep up with demand. Then the demand cooled. The lawsuits started. Multiple federal cases from creditors and contract partners piled up through 2025. And the operational costs that scaled up during the boom didn't scale back down fast enough. By January 2026, the company that had helped fuel an entire generation of food truck dreams was in bankruptcy court itself. Here's the lesson underneath that story, and it applies whether you're the manufacturer or the operator. The food truck industry has a gold rush problem. Every boom in visibility, a viral video, a hot new city ordinance, a wave of ghost kitchen hype, pulls in a wave of new capital and new operators who see the low headline entry price and assume that's the whole story. The ones who get hurt aren't usually the ones who underplanned on food. They're the ones who underplanned on everything that isn't food. The commissary contracts signed for more hours than they needed. The truck financed at a size built for a menu they never actually launched. The legal and compliance costs that quietly outgrew the business around them. So, who actually wins in this business? Almost never the person chasing the lowest possible entry price. It's the operators who treat this as what it structurally is, a low-margin, seasonal, operationally demanding small business that happens to be mobile. The owner-operators who work their own window, instead of carrying a full-time crew, consistently land in the higher end of the margin range simply by removing labor as a cost line. The operators who build a real catering pipeline in the fall so they're not scrambling for revenue in February. And the operators who track their numbers exactly, food cost percentage, labor cost percentage, revenue per event, rather than approximately, because in a business running on single-digit to low-teens net margins, a few percentage points of sloppiness is the entire difference between profit and loss. Now let's put a single year together two ways. In the optimistic scenario, you've picked a route with real lunch hour foot traffic, kept your menu tight enough to move fast under pressure, built 2 or 3 reliable corporate catering accounts, and you're working the window yourself instead of carrying a full crew. A truck in that position can generate somewhere between $250,000 and $500,000 a year in revenue, with a net margin in the 15 to 25% range. That's real money, and for a single operator, it's a genuinely strong outcome. In the realistic scenario, a handful of ordinary things go wrong. Your commissary raises its monthly rate. A permit renewal in a new city comes in higher than budgeted. Winter hits and street revenue drops 40% for 3 straight months while the fixed bills keep arriving. You didn't build a catering pipeline in the fall because you were too busy running the truck, so there's nothing to fill the gap. Under those conditions, that same truck can slide from a healthy double-digit margin down into the 2 to 6% range most trucks with employees actually experience, while the truck itself, sitting in the same reliable lunch spot, looks from the sidewalk exactly as busy as it did in July. So, is it worth it? A food truck is genuinely one of the lowest cost ways into the food business, and the mobility is a real structural advantage. You're not locked into a bad location for the next 5 years the way a restaurant is. But it demands real capital before you sell a single plate, a level of operational precision around throughput and food cost that most first-time owners underestimate, and a willingness to build revenue outside the truck itself, through catering, through corporate accounts, instead of hoping the lunch rush alone carries the whole year. For the operators who understand that the truck was never really the business, the route, the accounts, and the discipline were, this can be one of the most resilient small businesses in the entire food industry. For everyone else, it's a very expensive, very mobile lesson in fixed costs.